Good morning. Yes, John records for us the story about how Jesus met with his disciples and had this meal with them, just there on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And then after the meal, reinstates Peter amongst the other apostles so that they would know exactly what his role should be. We don't know much of what might have happened at that time. I have a feeling probably it was Jesus who had instructed Peter and said to him, after one of your ministries is about to start, you'll need to introduce a new member to the apostolic band, because Judas has given it up and gone away. Because after Jesus ascends, it is Peter who takes the lead now and says, we must find a replacement for Judas. And I don't think he'd have done this unless Jesus had instructed him to do it. But we have no record of this. But it is Peter who brings in Matthias, and they choose him by the casting of lots. And then he too is added to the apostolic band. But at this moment, of course, he has reinstated him. Peter, who had denied him 3 times, is readmitted 3 times. And 3 times he's given the instruction as to what he should do. 3 times he is to care for the lambs. He is to feed the sheep. He is to care for the sheep. He is to look after them and build them up. And it is Peter who would reach out to the world around him, taking the gospel out to the world and proclaiming it. Yes, even on Pentecost, proclaiming to all the people who had gathered there that Jesus truly was the Messiah who had died and had risen from the dead. But then when Jesus has reinstated Peter, he then says to him, a time will come, a warning in the sense that John records for us. Because remember, John was writing his gospel probably after Peter had been martyred in Rome. And John writes his gospel and he records this event because it's important that people should know that Jesus knew about it even before the church was established. Because John records Jesus saying to Peter, a time will come when people will take you to a place you do not want to go to, and there you will die. And of course, Peter was arrested in Rome, taken up to Vatican Hill and crucified on Vatican Hill. And when he realized the type of death he was to die, he said, I'm not worthy to die in the same way as my Lord. And they said, oh, well, we can fix that. And so they crucified him upside down on Vatican Hill. And now if you go, you'll find this great big church standing on Vatican Hill, a church that declares to the whole world that Jesus is Lord, and to the whole world that Peter and the early apostles brought a message to the world, the message of resurrection. But Peter, looking around with his usual enthusiasm, says, well, you've told me that, Lord, and I accept that. What about this man over here, pointing towards John? And remember, it's John who is recording this. And Jesus looks towards Peter and he says, don't worry about John. Don't worry about him. He said, if it's my will that he should remain until I come, that's nothing to do with you. Now, people got hold of this and it became a legend that John was not going to die until Jesus returned. And John was growing to be an old man in Ephesus. And people said, well, he can't die because Jesus hasn't yet come back. And John says, no, that isn't what Jesus said. What Jesus says was, if it is my will, then don't you worry about John, because John himself knew that his physical death was approaching even as he wrote this particular gospel. So what he wants to show us very simply is this. You haven't got to worry about what other people are doing. Just make sure that you're doing what God has told you what to do. You see, you may have an immense amount of authority in the church. There are people who are called into ministry. There are people who are called to be prophets. There's great intellectuals. There's people who are called apologists. By the way, that means just people who explain the Christian faith in a way that others can understand. All these people are there. There are people called in the church to give great leadership. There are great saints who change world and change governments and change nations. This may be you, but it may not. You see, don't look around and say, what does that person have to do? What does this person have to do? Just ask God simply, what do I have to do? And he may say to you quite simply, I want you to be a good husband, a good father. I want you to be a good wife, a good mother. I want you to be a good neighbor. I want you just to witness week by week to the truth of the gospel as you turn up in the church and as you worship me. I want you just to live your life in the way I want it lived. And let me deal with the problems. Let me deal with the fruit. I will bring the fruit in its own time. I will give you fruit, and fruit that will last, and will last even into eternity. So as Peter and John on this occasion are by that fire listening towards Jesus, Jesus reinstates Peter as the leader of the group. But he also warns Peter not to look to others and see what they are doing, but just to be quite sure he was doing it himself in the way that it should be done. Father, I thank you for this. And as we go on through this week, we're going to be looking at what Jesus said and what Jesus did as we come to understand the ministry that we have in his name. Amen.